Good evening. This is Juan Soto, president of Access User Groups, the founder of Access User Group, actually, and the president of Access with SQL Server Group. I'm really excited about tonight's presentation. We got a lot of great stuff for you to help you optimize Access with SQL Server. I'm hoping that you learn at least one of two golden nuggets to take away from tonight's presentation so that you can be there. We have quite the group here today. And so talk about you already have a SQL Server database and you already have an Access front end. And how do you address any slowness issues? Right. We want to make sure that it's optimized. You have an optimized environment because you don't want to have people waiting around for your Access database to come around, right? And the general perception is from everyone who is trying to use Access with SQL Server is things are going to get better. Things get better as you move it to say to SQL Server. Now, in the past, I've done SQL Server with Access Academy 1, Part 2, Part 3. You can find that at our YouTube channel, AccessUserGroups.org, where I talk extensively how to migrate. Excuse me, I'm also bad on the code, but we can migrate Access to SQL Server. Those are great sessions. We've had multiple sessions over the year. And so I encourage you to check that out. Today, it's a little bit more narrow. Today, we are talking about you already move your data to SQL Server and you're using front-end Access with it. And things were great when you first started, but now you steadily notice a decrease in performance. Why is that? Why is there problems with your performance? How can you resolve those issues? So this is a very nuanced topic, right? There may be multiple reasons why your database is slow. So we want to make sure that you address them. We're going to start with the most easier stuff and then talk about more complex things after that. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. So this is what you might notice, right? You notice database getting slower each day, even though data and users have not increased significantly. Users are complaining about long wait times. System becomes unstable. You need to reboot Access. Sometimes you need to reboot SQL Server. That's very rare, however. I've seen that not happen much at all. I just want to preface this discussion by saying, for the most part, if you follow my advice on the SQL Server Academy videos, 1, 2, and 3, you should be in good shape, right? There are some of these edge cases that you want to take a watch out for. The first one being check your hard drive configuration. Yeah, if you're not careful, your logs, which is what SQL Server uses to store changes in your data, may run wild. And so you want to make sure that you have enough hard drive space. So here's a typical thing I see when the client calls me up and says, Juan, my server is running so slow, like molasses. I rebooted, no up. Well, the first thing I do is check hard drive space on the server. If that hard drive space is 1 gigabyte, 500 megabytes, 100 megabytes, it's as the space decreases, it's going to start choking. So you want to watch out for that. So one of the first things I'm going to ask you to do, if you have low hard drive space, check to see how the low hard drive space, right? All right. So can everybody mute themselves, please? I hear some typing going on. Thank you. Let me mute you here, all here. All right. Now, if your logs are running well, right? So make sure. Now, usually when you're running out of hard drive space, it's because of your logs. Why do I say that? Because I don't know if you've done this, but when I upgraded to SQL Server from Access, like for example, I'll take a 1 gigabyte Access backend file, which is unheard of, right? Usually Access is not that big, but when you do that, you upload it to SQL Server. And then I check the size of the SQL Server database after I've uploaded the data. It's like 500 megabytes. It's like half the size. So SQL Server is even better at using less space for your data than Access is, right? So it goes from 1 gigabyte, not saying that's a formula half the size, but I do notice the difference in size once I upgraded SQL Server. And so I'm thinking, okay, I just upgraded this database. It's 500 megabytes. I got a terabyte I left on this hard drive, right? In that discussion, I'm good. And then months go by and years go by. And that's when I start hearing these complaints about speed and reliability, right? So you want to check as a very easy thing is to check the hard drive space. Okay, so you check the hard drive space, you run a hard drive space. What can you do? Well, for that, after you want to do is check your logs. And if you want to do that, you want to make sure that your the station I mentioned this. When you back up SQL Server, it shrinks your logs. So if you never back up your server, right? Just logs run wild, and you end up filling up the hard drive space. So the moral to the story is check your hard drive space. Not if there's a little to no hard drive space, check your log growth. If that's unchecked, make sure that this client is doing backups, regular backups, because every time SQL Server backs up, it'll shrink the logs. And that's a good practice. I'll talk more about that later. That use physical hard drives. They don't use state-of-the-art hard drives, right? Because server 15 years ago. So try to avoid that, right? You want to have solid state drives, and you want to have two small drives rather than a big one, because you have more throughput that way. So it's always a good idea if a client, now, sometimes a client calls me up out of the blue and said, Juan, what hard drive, what SQL server should I buy? What hard drive, what server box should I get? And I usually tell them, pick a box that goes with your budget. Because these days, those servers have solid state drives, have a ton of memory, have great processor. And you're coming from Access. You're going from Access. It's like going from a bicycle to a car. Any car you get is going to beat the hell out of a bicycle, right? And so I usually tell clients, hey, get at least two drives. Make sure you have plenty of memory, at least several gigs of RAM, and plenty of hard drive space. At least 500 gigabytes. And usually, 99% of the time, that's enough. So when somebody asks me, what kind of driver service I get, I tell them, get the one you can afford. Don't go overboard with it. All right, here's another one. SQL Server has statistics that is used to help with performance and keep your indexes in tune, right? So we recommend here is to update your statistics by running this command. And if you can, go ahead and take a screenshot now so you can do sys sp update stats. Now, a lot of this stuff that we're talking about is usually handled by a database administrator, right? Let's be frank. We're not SQL Server database administrators around here. We don't profess to be. We're professionals in Access, and we're experts in Access with SQL Server. Most of our clients are small clients. They can't afford to have a database, SQL Server database expert on staff. They just don't. Even the larger firms that we deal with, we have clients that have $500 billion in sales. They don't even have a SQL Server DBA in-house. But if you did, you wouldn't necessarily be doing these things, right? Don't piss off the local DBA. Please don't do that. So you want to consult with your IT department of your client, but sometimes you're the IT department. You're their database administrator. They have another firm that may handle their hardware and their network and their firewall, and that firm may have zero idea what they're doing with SQL Server, right? So you're it. In that case, it falls onto you to rebuild the stats after you check the hard drive space issue and the log files, right? And like I mentioned before, Ben Cloutier was kind enough to help me with this presentation. So Ben, welcome tonight, and thank you for helping me out. And he's in the chat, so if you want to chat with him, ask him more specific questions about this, please do so. Now, Ola scripts are just amazing. If you haven't done so, please go look at this website, ola.hallandgraham.com. They're free scripts. Everybody and their mom uses them in the SQL Server world. Just a wonderful scripting tool that's going to create the objects you need on your website, on your server, excuse me. And so if you're not using these scripts, go check them out. It's worth the check. Now, a lot of you may not know this, but SQL Server Express, well, if you use SQL Server Express, you know this, doesn't come with backup tools, right? Microsoft's not dumb. They want you to buy the full license of SQL Server. And so that comes with backups. That doesn't mean you have to go shell out $2,500 for SQL Server Standard Edition. You can use SQL Server Express, which is free, and use SQL Backup and FTP, which we love. We love that tool. Here's what I do recommend you purchase. Don't get the one database license, right? When you go to SQL Backup and FTP, I think it's like $35 for one database. That's not the version you want to buy. You want to buy the version that backs up all the databases on your server. So that's like less than $100. Get that one. And what's great about that is it'll perform the backup, and then it'll use Dropbox or OneDrive or whatever medium you have online. It uses all the major services to actually upload that data to the cloud. And it'll keep versions. And you can say, okay, I want you to keep 30 days of backups, and it'll rotate those backups automatically. So it backs up the database, syncs the logs, uploads that data to the cloud. You can even tell it, which I always do. I always configure it to alert me via email if there's a failure of the backup, right? So I get alerts. It'll also alert you if it backs up successfully, but I don't want my inbox flooded. So do this. So SQL Backup and FTP is highly recommended for that. The next thing you want to do is rebuild your indexes. You gotta be careful with this one because you should not do it in production hours, right? So if you have 20 people using that database, you want to either do it early in the morning, like 3 in the morning, or late in the evening after everybody's gone to rebuild the index. And again, use OLA scripts for this. You will have an easier time. Now, why do we need to rebuild indexes? Because indexes get fractured over time, right? What is the job of index? To quickly locate a record. If you go in there and you delete 100 records, those records are no longer in the index. The index is a file, separate that file maintained by the server, occupies space. When you do a query, it checks the index for which records to use in the query. So it's not looking through the whole database, right? The whole point of a database is to have index to quickly find things. If you're deleting records, let's say, for example, you purge 5 years of records from your index because it's 2025 and you have some data from 1987. You purge 5 years. That's a lot of data. And that's going to mean that your index is going to be severely out of date. So you want to be able to rebuild these indexes after you've done large maintenance on your database, right? To delete all records, you added a ton of new records. Although when you add records, I believe it does update the index as well. Again, I don't pretend to be a SQL Server expert. I'm an expert on Access with SQL Server. The only thing I know about SQL Server clusters is that they're made out of peanuts and caramel. They're my favorite.
Hey Juan, I can confirm that yes, indeed, indexes are updated real time with new data.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for chiming in. Appreciate it. All right. This is this again. Now we're getting to the edge cases, right? You've checked everything else. You rebuild your indexes. Now we're getting into the real edge of what might be happening with your server. And there's a setting in here that you need to look at ad-hoc workload, right? And every time you execute a query in SQL Server, there's an execution plan that goes on. And this is something that happens no matter what kind of query you do, right? So whether it be a pass-through query, whether it be a view that you're sitting on the server, Now, if there is no execution plan, if it's a brand new query, SQL Server will create an execution plan and then execute the query, right? There are whole schools of thought about tweaking execution plans to improve performance. I have never had the need to modify an execution plan. But then again, I'm not working with millions and millions of records, right? These are Access databases that convert to SQL Server. They're small department databases. The most I've ever had is 100 users on an Access database for an insurance company. And that was quite large. But I'm not, I've never had a need to go in and start tweaking execution plans. Number one, because I had to learn what they mean. And number two is I might do more harm than good. But having said that, there's a series of things you can do to make your work server go faster with execution plans. Number one is uh, you can reduce the number of plans generated when using dynamic SQL, right? So this also applies to pass-through queries. So what SQL Server does is it has all these plans in memory and hard drive space. And when you turn on this setting, ad-hoc workload, it minimizes the amount of plans, frees up memory. This is particularly important for SQL Server Express. Why? There's three limitations in SQL Server Express. Limitations are it uses only 1 gig of RAM on the server. Your hard drive space can't exceed more than 11 gigabytes. You can have a 20 terabyte server, so only use 1 gig of RAM. And it's going to be, I think they uploaded that data that's with 4 cores. Now you can use a maximum of 4 cores. So you can have a 20 core server. It only uses 4 cores. Having said all that, we love SQL Server Express. We use it all the time. I can count on one hand how many customers have had to migrate from SQL Server Express to regular SQL Server. And now I'm celebrating 30 years of this. I used to have hair in my head 30 years ago. And very rarely have I had clients have to upgrade the SQL Server or regular instance. Oh, so I'm gonna get a lounge. Honey, can I get a lounge? You see a lounge anywhere? Hon, can I get a throat lounge from a lounge for my. I was like, I got one here. Oh, thank guys. I got these halls immune defense. They're citrus. It tastes amazing, like a little kid in the candy store sometimes. Lavender. Yes, not a lounge, lozenges. All right, let's see this house me here with the coffee. I love to talk. You stick a quarter in me, I'll talk all night. So when I can't talk, it really pains me. Okay. Please note that this is a server-wide setting, right? Again, if you have a SQL DBA, you want to consult with him or her before you execute this. I notice there's some ongoing discussion in the comments, so I'm gonna stop, pause briefly here, and read the comment. All right, how do I bring up comments? Give me a second in the chat. I'm looking for the chat window. See participants. I see. All right, we'll check the chat later. All right. Now we're getting into more of the weeds here with parameterization. Um, Parameterization has to do with queries, right? If you have a query with a criteria, then you have queries with parameters. And so when it comes to parameterization, SQL Server comes with set to simple. Sometimes you want to set that to force. Now, Brent Ozar has an amazing tool set for this, which he gives away for free. If you're not subscribed to Brent Ozar's newsletter, please run and do so. He sends out newsletters throughout the week. Really good. I've learned a ton from him. I purchased courses from him. Uh, he has a consultant's toolkit that we use a lot. And Ben has a lot of experience using it because more and more clients are really taking advantage of SQL Server Access, and we need to find out what the issues are with the database. And so his scripting tools allow us to check for stuff like this. Is parameterization set to simple force? I'm dying to see the comments, but I'm gonna finish my thing here. Okay. Here's the thing about views. We love views. We use them all the time. And when you do a view in SQL Server, it stores the execution plan with the view on the server, and then you can tweak it. I've never tweaked an execution plan in my life, but that doesn't mean that you may not have to. So let's assume you have a very popular view that's used by every user of the system multiple times every time you open a database, right? Maybe it's a view of open orders. So Ben opens the database, he gets a view of open orders. Larry opens the database, he's using the view of open orders. Everybody in the company is calling this query every single time, multiple times when they're opening the database and browsing through forms and running reports. This view is going to hit every one time. And I've talked about this before. What happens is SQL Server is not dumb. It sees that you're using this view extensively. It'll save the execution plan in memory. And I literally seen this happen where the performance improves over time because it's now saving this in memory. Now, if you're using SQL Server Express, it's a little more difficult, right? Because you're only limited to 1 gig of RAM. But if you're using standard, excuse me, if you're using standard, you'll save it. The more the story is, leverage their views. They're great. They're awesome. However, a view should not be used for sorting or filtering, right? You need to do that in the access later. So you link your view into into Access frontend, and you use another query to sort, filter that view. Don't include sorting or filtering in your view. Except for, here's the big exception, when you're using a multi-tenant database. I had his fellow consultant call me up this week. She has a product, commercial product she wants to use. She wants to start selling Access. She wants to host the data with us because we offer hosting. And one of the first questions I asked her is, well, is your database multi-tenant ready? In other words, if you sell 100 licenses of your product, you want to use only one database. You don't want to have 100 databases. Number one, I'm going to charge you for 100 databases. It becomes quickly unattainable. And so you want to have this one database, just like Amazon and eBay and all these other major players. They have one database with everybody's orders in there. You want to have one database for multiple people using your database. And you don't want that data to commingle, right? This is especially important when talking about HIPAA data. In other words, if you have a medical practice, we're working on this right now. We're creating a software package for a veterinary hospital that he wants to resell. And we're building, and in fact, Ben is working on that project. We're building this from scratch. And the intention is to sell it to every veterinary hospital in America with just one database. When you have that situation, how do you slice the data so that if I have my hospital and you have your hospital, I'm not seeing your patients. You're not seeing my patients. I'm not seeing your prognosis. You're not seeing my prognosis. And we use views with a function that will separate the data. And Ben, if he's still online, he can give you more details on that. There is another way to do that, believe, but we've been using functions with views to do that, right? So the function might be customer ID, right? So if I have a list of patients in my hospital, say select star from TBL patients where company ID equal function name and pass the ID of the company, right? To the view. I link these views in my front end, and now I'm not going to see your data because your data never makes it to my Access database, right? I know I don't have direct links to your tables. I only have access to the views, and the views will use that function to segment the data for me. So it's multi-tenant database using views, using functions. So this is one that I just recently learned. Ben put this in there for me today when he was working through this project, this PowerPoint, where he talks about parameterization. Mike Edwards, I'm not sure if you've seen if you use this form before like this, where it doesn't use the double quotes with the ampersands like it does up here, but goes straight to here because I haven't used this myself. And I was asking Ben earlier, so well, how does it know? I think what happens is now you have to have a parameter collection. And in the parameter collection, you supply the TXT order data, I believe. Then you execute the query, right? You're muted, Mark.
I'm not used to using Zoom. Okay, there we go.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think you have a parameter collection, which I never use. I don't I don't use like parameter collection, but you establish a parameter collection, then you supply the SQL string, and then you execute the query through a DODB. And so I think that's what he's saying here is faster at doing it that way than using this substitution, if you will, the query processor.
You're basically building an SQL statement on that first one.
Yeah, the first one. All right. Sargability. Avoid writing non-sargable queries that thwart using indexes. The whole point is to be able to execute against the database in the most efficient manner, which means leveraging indexes. If you have a query where you're saying year order date equal 2024, what is the problem with that query? If there is no column called year, that's why you have this function here, right? There's no column called year, because if there were a column called year, you would say year. And I don't recommend you call your column year, by the way. You want to specify like order year, for example, instead of just saying year. But if you had a column called order year, you would use that, right? Or where order year equal 2024, but you don't. So now you're using this function, year, which is never a good idea in terms of performance. And second, on top of that, you're avoiding the index. So now it's got to look at all the queries, execute this function here, and bring back the results. Instead, use this greater than or equal to and less than equal date approach to doing that. Try to stay away from domain functions. What are they're the biggest culprit? I remember I was working with Ben Sackrick on the project once. We migrated a lot of domain functions over. dsum, dmax, dmin. Stay away from those because they kill performance. Avoid using for arbitrary SQL statements. This one, I must admit, I've been guilty of using this in the past. I love pass-through queries. I love the fact that I can modify them for my reports, right? As you know, pass-through queries by definition are read-only. And so they're ideal for reports, right? So I will have a report that executes a stored procedure via pass-through query. I'll modify a pass-through query to include criteria, and then I'll send that off to the server. The problem you have is when you guys start getting to transactions. Let's say, for example, you have a pass-through query that updates all the pricing of your database by 10%, especially now when you got inflation running rampant. A lot of times clients have to increase their pricing almost on a weekly basis. And you create a tool for your client to update egg prices, for example. Well, every time you do that, it's wrapping into transactions, and then it's out of your control because Access is the one that's interfacing with SQL Server through the ODBC layer, right? You have to look at the 3 different components going on when you execute a query. You got Access using its own flavor of SQL, right? We all know that will vary from T-SQL. Then you got the ODBC driver to translate the Access SQL to T-SQL. So going through that translation process is a hassle. And then you have no control over the transactions themselves. This is why when you go in there in a large SQL Server database and you update 100,000 rows, we call those coffee breaks because you start the query, you go get yourself a cup of coffee, you stop by Mark's desk, say, Mark, how's it going? You talk about the game last night. And eventually, when you get back to your desk, you're hoping it's done. And then meantime, you're hearing complaints from people how slow the database is now. We're going to talk about that next. Bulk modifications. Access sucks at updating a lot of records to SQL Server. It just does. Don't do it. Don't delete a ton of rows using the Access query. Don't use Access query to update a ton of rows because it's just going to hurt performance bigly. Instead, you want to use a pass-through query to delete rows, or using the ADODB command to delete rows, right? Using easy ADODB technology that I developed on my website, AccessExperts.com. And then use Access query tables and then do a bulk update using XML. We love XML bulk updates. We love it so much. We've included it in our code base. XML updates does have its limitations as well. When you start looking at millions of records, it really is not the panacea that we want it to be. But for 100,000 records, hey, XML is great. It'll be done in a flash. Uploads the records to the SQL Server in a flash. 1,000,000 records or more, not so much. If you're doing 1,000,000 records of addition to SQL Server, I would question why you're using Access to begin with, right? Like I said, there's a lot of golden nuggets in here. You want to get your hands on a recording, pause it, and then come back and review these and get to learn these concepts. You're going to be using them a lot through your career. Query stores. We're getting to the weeds again. Query stores, and the next slide, tracing, is something I rarely use. I don't think I've ever used query stores, but turning on query stores does help you to diagnose and analyze, mostly because I got Ben Clough here on staff, and I asked Ben to go do the work for me, or Junie Beth, or somebody else, right? And with I don't pretend to be an expert in query stores or plan execution plans or anything like that. Query store is a great way, however, to see this. We did a chat several years ago. I don't know if Ben Sackworth remembers this, but I did a chat where I had a European gentleman, or maybe even George Heffer remembers this, where he actually analyzed how Access interacts with SQL Server via the query store. And he showed us all the queries, intermediate queries that the ODBC driver does. Because you're thinking to yourself, okay, this is a fairly simple update query, updating 100 records with the latest pricing for eggs. He showed us in detail how the ODBC driver and SQL Server is executing query after query. First, it selects all the records from the egg table. Then it filters those records for the particular ed type, and then it updates the records. And then, I mean, query after query. You're thinking it's just one query. Here I am. I'm sending this query through pass-through query through ODBC. I mean, through the direct to the server, or through Access, excuse me, Access doing it. And Access is using the ODBC driver, and the ODBC driver is breaking down the query into further queries. It's a fascinating topic. And it gave us a great behind the scenes view of how Access handles queries with SQL Server. So if any of you guys have the link to that chat, please bring it up. I can't remember the name of the guys. If anybody remember his name, let me know. To their chat on this. I'm terrible with names. This is another one, SQL Server Profile, right? ODBC trace. Rarely use it because I usually got people who does this for me. I must confess, but been through this, does this a lot. And so we have blog posts that talk about how you can use ODBC traces. We're getting into the thick of the woods here, right? This is getting into the nitty gritty. Because you checked everything else I told you to check, the logs, the hard drive space, everything else, the server settings. And now you're looking for that specific query that's killing your performance. This is, again, we mentioned about the importance of backups. I've had many discussions with clients over the years who swear to me they have great backups in place. I have the best backup. I back up the entire server. And when I hear that, I know immediately they're in trouble. Because they turn to their IT vendor, who's not a SQL Server expert, and the IT vendor says, "Oh yeah, we do bare metal backup. We back up everything on that server. Not a problem." I'm not going to get into the discussion of testing your backups. That's a separate topic. But I said, okay, great. I'm glad you're back in doing bare metal backup. How are you addressing the compression of the logs after a SQL Server backup? And when I get blank stares, I know they're in trouble because they do these bare metal backups every night, but they're not working with SQL Server to back up individual databases and shrinking the logs. We're going back to the log shrinking again. They call me up and says, "Juan, my server just quit." "Oh, Juan, my server's too slow. Can you check it?" I go check the hard drive space. Not enough hard drive space. I go check. They've never done a backup of their SQL Server in a long time, years even. You got to go back to the basics. Unless that bare metal backup, and some bare metal backup programs do have an agent for SQL Server. And the IT guy swears to me, "Oh yeah, we have an agent there. It's working and it's backing up the server. I'm on top of it. Great." But if you're getting blank stares across the table from these guys, when you talk about SQL Server backups and log shrinking, you know they're in trouble. Because these bare metal backups can cause problems when you restore. I just went through this with a client in Michigan. They never restored their tables, their databases, never restored to see if if their backups working. I insisted. I said, "You need to check the restore. I'm glad you're doing bare metal backups. I'm glad you're doing SQL Server backups. Have you tested the restore?" Never. Because they're really proud. Now, the way this bare metal backup strategy works is you have a device on the network that you back up to, and then that device, a separate black box, is uploading these backups to the cloud. And so rarely what they tell me is, "You see that device over there in the corner? We would use that in case we lost our server. It's not as good as the server. It's only good as a stopgap until we get another box in here." Great. Have you tested it? And that's when I get the blank stares back from me. Even though I'm an Access guy, I'm an Access and SQL Server expert, I challenge them. I challenge my clients and says, "Hey, when was the last time you did a restore? When was the last time you simulated an attack on your network and you lost every PC? If I come in here and there was a ransomware And every one of these P's were bricked. What's the procedure? Show me the procedure on paper. What is the procedure? So my client in Michigan went through that whole exercise. I'm really proud of them. Really did a great job identifying the testing. And I even supplied, Mark Edwards also had another client, another manufacturing client that went through this. And Mark was involved with them as well, where we tested and simulated the simulation. It's not easy. It's expensive. It's a pain in the butt. But you want to manage. You want to react. If you're backing up your servers and you're not testing them, you're reacting in cases of failure. And you're trying to figure out how to, okay, who's got the password for this and where are the backups being stored and how do we restore and what is the procedure? You're reacting. And there is never a good time to react to an emergency. You want to be managing the emergency, not reacting to the emergency. So do yourself a favor, work with your clients to test your backups and make sure you have a robust backup system in place. All right. So let's go ahead and look at these comments. See if I can bring them up here. Let me stop the share. And okay. Do you ever recommend, Tom Workboard, do you ever recommend to clients to go directly to Azure or Amazon or ES instead of a new server? Yeah, everybody's going to Amazon. We are a Microsoft partner. And so we offer hosting to clients. It's all in Azure. The only nice benefit of that is they're calling us in case there was a problem. They're not calling Microsoft directly against somebody somebody who has a difficult accent to understand, right? But yeah, this is the trend now. Everybody's going online. Remember that bug, Tom? Thank you very, very, Tom, for your question. Remember that bug we had last year where the airlines went down for several days because Microsoft data centers went down because of this one vendor. Going
I
online
do
is not the.
remember that.
Yeah, remember
Isn't
that?
that like
Yeah.
Cloudflare or Cloud something?
Cloudflare, yes.
Yep.
Yes. So going online is the best thing since sliced bread until it all
Right.
falls down like a house of cards.
Or until like my sister owns a cold storage company and in at their location they just can't get good internet. So
Yeah, yeah. Now our clients were not impacted by that because we have a practice where every morning Microsoft Access outputs PDFs of the inventory, of the orders, anything that's relevant. So if there is a total blackout online, they can go to the PDF copies and see what open orders they have. They have a list of customers. These are large PDFs. They're not intended to be printed. They get generated every morning. The first user who gets on the system generates these, and now they're available. It's a wonderful alternative to having to figure out, okay, what are our open orders and what are we shipping today? And I don't know what's happening. Oh my gosh, I already have no hair. Now I'm gonna lose whatever left I got. So you want to modify your systems as a option. This is a great upsell for clients. Make sure that they have physical backups of their data. And this is how I help them make that transition to the cloud because they get concerned. So what happens if the cloud goes away? Well, we do have this PDF option I encourage you to do. Okay, somebody asked me, Donna, is this relevant to SQL Azure? Some of the stuff is not relevant. SQL Azure is an automated service. There's very little you can configure there, right? Some of the stuff that I talked about today is mostly is with local storage. There is some relevant stuff like execution plans, query stores, maximizing use of views that we talked about. But yeah, Ben also chimed in here. Ola for Azure, no, because he mentioned Ben answered that question for you. Great, thank you, Ben. We appreciate that.
He did. Can
If
I,
they use SQL Azure scores, go ahead.
sorry,
Somebody
I
want to
just
chime in?
I just wanted to, like, Ben's been really helpful in the chat, and all of your easy ADOB DB has helped me and everything like that. It's awesome.
Thank you. Please
I
don't do that, please.
don't do what? Oh yeah, yeah.
No, don't
Yeah,
do that,
yeah,
please.
yeah. Please, oh stop. Like, no, don't, no, don't stop. Yeah. Um, I think for me, it's just I know all the techniques. I think I know the techniques and I understand them all. It's going through and understanding what is the most efficient to use. Like I have forms right now that are really pretty simple data entry forms, and they're taking seconds to load, sometimes 9 seconds, and it's insane. I look at the query that I have that does the loading of the data, and it's like instantaneous. So it's
Mhm.
almost like it's like some of the combo boxes. It's not, I don't know. I'm trying to look at, I just don't know how to make it faster. It seems like the actual
I got
open
some tips for you.
form
You want to hear them?
with yes.
Okay, first of all, there's an article I wrote on my blog, accessexperts.com/blog, called Deja Vu. You want to search for deja vu. So type in your browser, deja vu space site colon accessexperts.com. The load sequence, when you have a form that has multiple subforms, and I did not know this until I wrote that article. Access loads the subform first before it loads the main form. And
Yes.
Mark Edwards is nodding his head there for doing that. So one of the things you want to do is start stripping out from your form. Okay, I'm gonna start stripping these subforms and then start adding them again, see who the culprit is. Who
So
is causing this load time to go?
this is even like and I realized that the subforms loaded first, and so I've done it like I had one that had tons of subforms, and so I revamped it all just because
Good.
because it was
Do you
like
do dynamic loading of your subforms? When you
yes,
only load them
yes,
when you, okay, perfect.
yeah. So
Donna, you're a woman after my heart. Thank you so much.
so I had, a project that has a project. They have a contact location, and that location has contacts, and those contacts have emails, and those contacts have phone numbers, that sort of thing. So one to many, child, grandparent, whatever. Anyway, revamped all those, but I tried this on a form that I have that has no subforms, and I put a timer on at the beginning and at the end, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like it's like it says that it's 0.28 seconds to just go from clicking it from the data sheet to opening up the form. And I do something simple like where I execute a stored procedure that actually takes my data and copies it into a I want to say temp table, but it's not like a temporary table. It's actually a mirrored image of the table. It's a holding table. It's a
Hmm.
right.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then so I use your execute my command to execute that stored procedure.
Thank you. Thank
Then
you.
I have a new ADODB record set. And so I set my forms record set to that record source, right? It's pretty
Yeah.
simple. And that whole routine runs like just like snap of a finger. And I just cannot figure out why this stupid form's taking like 6, 7 seconds. And I think it's some
Yeah.
access crap in there too. Or
Well,
Does
look,
your
you hit the nail on the head.
does your
Sometimes you
form
just gotta declare bankruptcy and just start with a new form to see if the form is corrupted. Sometimes forms will get corrupted.
oh, I just today, like compacts and repairs on some things weren't working. My database was up to almost a gig, 987.
Yeah, it's not good.
And so I had done compact repairs, and it took like 10 minutes to open up the VBA window and stuff.
Wow,
And
no, it's not good.
so I
Yeah,
finally,
even though like, the limit is 2 GB, after you
I
approach a
know.
gig, it becomes unusable
Well, and it was
sometimes.
insane. And I had already imported it into another database, and that did nothing. Today, it actually worked. It's 128K now from
Oh
almost
wow.
like anyway.
Something is going on. I would encourage you to start a new access file, import the objects from the old file to the new one.
Which
Have you
I
tried
did
that?
today. Yeah. And it
Okay,
went down
good.
to
All right.
128 from almost a gig.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right, good, good. All right, sounds good. Well, I
Sorry, Mark.
appreciate that. And thank you so much for the questions.
Mm. Thank you so much.
You bet.
I'm almost got my hair's gonna almost look like yours soon. I'm just saying.
Oh no, Dala. Oh no.
Don't forget to decompile when you also before you
Oh
come.
yes, that's
I
good.
did
That's a
that
good
and
one.
it didn't work at first. And finally I got it all today that like I had done all those tricks and I'm like, why isn't my tool bag of tricks working? Right. But yeah.
I love Tom's comment. Thank you, Don, by the way. Not Tom's comment about the only reliable backup is one that person can prove that they can restore. I might just print that out, put it in the plaque in the office there. Thank you, Tom, for that golden nugget.
Sure. I also follow Brent Ozar a lot, so I think
Right.
that's probably who I've heard it from many times.
There is a service. We're actually partners of the service. So if you go through us, you get a discount, verifiedbackups.com. Take a look at that. If you're interested, let us know and we'll give you a discount over the regular pricing that's on there because we're authorized resellers on verified backups. So, and then use it. Look, a lot of these men has been answering back and forth, so I'm not going to rehash them. There are a lot of great comments. One of the major causes of business failure, especially small business, is loss of data. One of the things that I'm planning about doing is starting a new podcast called Discover the Power of Your Data. Because I own that trademark. Discover the Power of Your Data. I own discoverthepowerofyourdata.com. So I was going to start a podcast. And the very first episode of the podcast is no matter what business you're in, whether it's a hot dog stand on the corner or a multinational company, you're in the business of data. No matter what business you're in. The hot dog guy, he has an inventory of buns, hot dogs, how much hot dogs he sold in a day, how much inventory he has in soda, and relish and mustard, right? You don't know if it's in the back of a napkin. He's got it somewhere, right? Maybe he's got it in his head, the data. No matter what business you're in the business of data. And we're going to be talking about how the 4 pillars of data. You have to protect it with backups. You have to nourish it, making sure it's good data goes in, good data, good reports come out, right? And you have to leverage this data with reports, and that's the whole point, right? Discover the power of your data, leverage the data, and then put that data to work for you, so that you can see where you've been and determine where to go. So that's coming. Hopefully, we'll have our first episode here in March. Changing how you approach the loading of the form. Thank you very much for that. Back and forth. Wow, a lot of great comments. I need to invite you guys to the chat. Well, okay, look, did you guys like today's chat? Give me a heads up. Let me know if you like today's chat. Thank you, Ben, for helping out. Mark Edwards, thank you for being here. George Hepworth.
Can I
George,
ask,
when is your next session at AccessUserGroups Pacifics?
My next meeting,
Yes.
it's March, whatever, the first Thursday in March. I'm going to take the opportunity to talk about how to transition, or how to prepare your Access database to transition it to a new developer. Things you have to look for, like, well, obviously documentation comments would be one, but some of the other little things that I have been looking at as ways to make that transition a little easier for.
Nice. If you're interested in joining George at Access User Pacific, please visit our website, AccessUserGroups.org/calendar for all the events throughout the month. And join me next week at Access Beginners, where we talk about forms. What are forms? How to create them. I'm going to show users how to create a form automatically, not just for the wizard. There's a nice little shortcut that you may not know about, how to create a form right away. And it's all about forms next week, next Tuesday, the 18th. This has been Juan Soto, Microsoft Access MVP for 14 years in a row. Thank you so much for joining us today, live from Mérida, Mexico. Hasta próxima semana. God bless you guys. Thank you for coming.
thanks again. Take care.
Vaya con Dios.
Vaya con Dios. Hasta la próxima.